Minnesota in probably 20 years.
Bring your ass. Welcome to Flagrant Howls, a Minnesota Timberwolves lifestyle podcast.
Well, I don't know, Kyle Theige. Should we be concerned that Phil did not bring his ass into the new year for the Flagrant Howls podcast? Should we be concerned?
I'm concerned that you swore. We had a big on again, off again about that the other day about swearing. And then I was reminded in the comment section that every time this podcast starts, it says the word ass. And also the state of Minnesota embraced bringing ass into a whole marketing strategy. But that was in 2024, Ross. This is all about moving forward, 2025, new year, new goals, new intentions, new resolutions. So we're no more pettiness. I just want to start the new year off right with you, two guys that didn't take. I haven't had a vacation all year. I don't know about you, but I haven't gone anywhere in 2025.
I am fresh off of a sabbatical, but the sabbatical is basically a staycation. I did not do a lot other than work at some stuff at my home, go see some people that I haven't seen. I actually took, I mean, you know, Kyle, in the business that I'm in, and to an extension what you're in now, you're never truly off. So I did do some work when I wasn't working, but just to be able to get away, do that from home, have less of it to do, it was very nice. But it is nice to have that fresh, clean slate here in 2025, and we should mention Phil will be back. He is just using some much-deserved time to do other stuff, and he trusts you and I enough to put out some form of a show, Kyle. So let's not screw it up. And on the swearing thing, I will say, I generally do believe shows are better for not doing it. But to your point, I mean, Ant's kind of made it a part of our vernacular now. So it is what it is when it's talking about Timberwolves basketball.
I'm going to try to swear less in 2025. I know I'm going to end up swearing more, but we'll get there. But yeah, Phil's taking a little maybe desert vacation right now. He'll be back. But the content can't stop because as you wake up this morning, January 2nd, the Wolves are in the midst of a really incredible kind of two-game set against Oklahoma City that they dropped. Poor third quarter execution. Again, kind of got strangleholded by the Thunder and the way that they play defense. And then tonight, 6:30 p.m. Central Time tip. I believe it's on TNT, Ross. Timberwolves hosting the NBA champion Boston Celtics. A little earlier tip, but it should be a really good game. But this kind of all encapsulates this weird schedule they're in right now where I think Alan Horton had this. They're 9-5 in their last 14 games, but all 9 of those wins are against, all 14 of those games, I think, are against teams at or above 500. So they're playing really good teams. They have a pretty good record in the month of December, despite the fact that, as Chris Finch said today with Paul Allen, it's never pretty, and they might just not be a pretty basketball team, but they are trying to kind of sludge through this part of the schedule and find things that work. There's some lineups that do work. There's some lineups that don't work. But all of that said, I thought the best way to start this podcast for the new year would be how everyone else started their new year. Let's talk about some resolutions, maybe goals, maybe intentions for certain players or people associated with this team so that we can kind of springboard into the new year with some positivity.
And we will also, afterwards, we will transcribe these. We will send them over to Target Center in paper form. We will also email them in audio form. And I'm sure Tim Connolly, Chris Finch, and the entire Wolves brass will take everything we have to say to heart, and it will cure all what ails the Minnesota Timberwolves. Although, to your point, not a lot ailing them lately, but you don't buy yourself a ton of wiggle room when you start off the way that they did. And you and Phil have talked about it ad nauseum as to why the season likely started the way it did. When you have massive roster upheaval just hours before the season starts. However, that's not an excuse. You still need to win the games. The Timberwolves have done a much better job of doing that lately and hoping it continues. How do you want to set this up, Kyle? Do we want to rotate resolutions? Because it is possible we didn't really talk about ours. We could have some of the same ones.
Yeah, let's go a little snake draft still. Because it's my favorite way to do this stuff. So I'll start. I won the coin toss. But if you have one that is similar, maybe it's about a certain player, just feel free to piggyback. And also, if you're listening, as always, thank you for supporting the show and subscribe, like, whatever. But also hop on YouTube and throw some of your resolutions in for this team, things you think. I would imagine a lot of them are going to be, hey, Chris Finch, call timeouts. Some things that you think could help this team kind of figure it out again, because to Ross's point, they started slow, kind of figuring it out, maybe more than people realize. There's still 50-some games left, but the world is their oyster, but there are certain things that do need to change, and they do need to be, there are bad habits, bad rotations, bad things that need to be left last year and change as we flip the calendar to 2025. And for me, Ross, number one, for Jaden McDaniels, would simply be a New Year's resolution, just shoot better. No creativity in this one, just find that shooting stroke.
Fairly simple. Just shoot better.
I've been on a little bit of a staycation too, because I ran through Squid Game season 2 in like a half a day. I was kind of running out of stuff to watch. So I just kind of randomly picked games. And if you go back and look over the first 35 or so games of the season, there's a lot of times, man, when Jaden McDaniels, who, in addition to the HOA, Ross, I'm also the president of that fan club, and we've been struggling to get attendance lately. Not as many people want to show up to that meeting, and when they do, they really want to get heated. But for Jaden, just find that stroke again. He's shooting a career low 30% from three, despite shooting a career high in attempts. I think it's like 3.7. He shot 34% last year, and 2 years ago during that like 52 games that Karl-Anthony Towns missed, he got to shoot, I think it was 40% even on the season. So when I watch games that the Wolves have lost, it'll be like they're up 8 or they're up 11, and Jaden gets a corner 3 attempt, misses it, and then like 90% of the time the other team comes down and hits a 3, so instead of it's like a 6-point swing. And those little things, if Jaden was just shooting 35%, he might never be a 40% shooter again. But if he was shooting like 35%, I think there's a direct correlation to this team having 2 or 3 more wins just off of that. So his defense, in my opinion, and when you watch it, is back to the all second team, all defense that he was last year. But this team right now is struggling offensively. I think, they're first in defensive rating in the month of December, but offensively they're like 20th. That's not good enough to win. And it really does, if Jaden could just lift them up a little bit with just making some of those corner threes, those good looks that he gets, I think that would solve a lot of the offensive issues that are hurting this team right now. So Jaden McDaniels, I don't know how you're going to do it, but just shoot better. Just make threes.
For a career, Kyle, where do you think he needs to be as a three-point shooter, but also just field goal percentage in total? Right now this year, he's just a touch over 43%, but that's all field goals. That's not just 3 points. Where do you think he needs to be successful, not just for him, but to your point, the Minnesota Timberwolves? Because it's a league where when you get a chance to do what you just said, bury a team and how quickly a 6-point swing can happen, you kind of need to make those shots, especially when you're wide open. And teams are encouraging you to make them. They're leaving you open because they don't think you can make them.
They are treating Jaden McDaniels from the perimeter like they treat Rudy Gobert from like the inside a little bit. Like teams aren't even that scared about Rudy Gobert catching the ball around the rim. They're just not. They're like, okay, whatever. Like you're probably not going to catch it, and if you do, you might not make it, or you might not jump to try to dunk the ball. Which again, Rudy, just like jump, you're tall. But for Jaden, I think his like effective field goal percentage this year for the first time in his career is below like 50%. Like that's really bad. So I don't know. To me, there's playmaking in there. Like I've seen him connect with Rudy a little bit on lobs. Obviously his rebounding is up. He can get to he has such long arms and limbs that like he can finish around the basket pretty well. There was a play in that OKC game where he sets a screen on a curl and then he gets to the rim. Really easy stuff. So maybe leaning into that a little more. But from the 3-point percentage, which again, if he's going to be, I think the Scottie Pippen stuff, maybe we should pause. We'll bring that up maybe this summer. But I just think he has to shoot 35% from 3. I don't know if he's going to get to 40% mechanically. I don't know if his jumper is built for that. And that's a really high mark to shoot 40%. But 30% is also like what we saw with Josh Okogie, where it's like, oh, you're actually nuking this team's potential because teams are just doubling Ant, doubling Mike, and not even worried about Jaden in the corner. So I don't think it's a high bar to just get back to. He shot 35%, I think, 2 of his first 4 years, and last year, again, like I said, he was 34%. So just find a way a little bit to get that confidence. I think with Jaden McDaniels, a lot of it is confidence, and that's why, Ross, I'm always concerned about pulling him out of a starting lineup, even though I see a lot of credence to that, because his on-off numbers right now are, when he's off the floor, the team is really good.
Well,
but
and
he's a big part of their defense, so it's tough.
Not just in basketball, Kyle, in all sports, so much of the game is the mental aspect. So you worry about, okay, if we tell a guy he's going to ride the bench a bit more, will that actually, we think it'll help us, but will it actually hurt us because he'll be even worse when he does play? Yeah, there's so much that goes into that. So your first New Year's resolution for the Timberwolves is Jaden McDaniels needs to shoot better. I'm going to lead off with mine because I hesitated to use, I'll lead off with this one for number one because I hesitated to use it, but I still think it's valid even though the team has played better the last month or so. And I think you had it, was it 9-5 over the last 14? Maybe 9-4 over the last 13, something along those lines. I still think we need to see a little bit more fight from the 2024-2025 Minnesota Timberwolves. At times, Kyle, and that third quarter against OKC reminded me a lot of the 2022-2023 Minnesota Timberwolves, where you saw really good basketball, and then you saw maybe a quarter or a half, typically in the second half, where it didn't make any sense as to what was happening. And that, especially at the beginning of the year, maybe less so now because we've seen less of it, to me that's a problem because that makes them look, or maybe they just are, more immature as a team than we want them to be at this stage of where this process is at. So I'm just looking to see a little bit more fight from the Timberwolves. And what do I mean by that, Kyle? I mean not letting teams go on like 30-8 runs. When it's starting to spiral out of control, do something. To your point, maybe that is Chris Finch. Call a timeout. Stop the bleeding. Maybe it's just a player stepping up saying, okay, I don't know which one. Okay, this little 14-1 run, this stops right now. I'm gonna get my looks and I'm gonna make my baskets. I just want to see less of the lopsided quarters. And to me, I'm not saying anybody does it intentionally. I don't believe that for 1 second. But some of these quarters and halves, they just really spiral, Kyle. And we can't let that happen if this team is going to get to where we all hoped they would be this year, somewhere back in the top 4, which is still very obtainable. But for that to happen, I think you have to start minimizing damages like the one you just saw against OKC a couple nights ago.
Yeah, to your point about confidence and the mental side of it in all sports, last year's team was confident that they had a really good defense and they just had a tougher jaw. I don't think this year's team has a glass jaw by any sense, and using a boxing analogy, but they still are a really good defense, right? Like for the month of December, they're pretty much first, second, or third, however you want to look at it in defensive rating. But because they don't have that confidence or that continuity with one another, I mean, every post, pregame, radio hit, whatever, is someone on this team saying, we're still trying to figure it out. They never said that last year because they had kind of figured it out. So whether they're still trying to acclimate to how Julius plays or Dante's trying to figure out, what his role is, or Nas is once again trying to figure out what his role is. Yeah, that third quarter against what might be the best team in the league, so you kind of give them a little bit of a pass, but you can't have these situations. So I think your resolution is really good, and I'm just going to go into my next one, and I just called it Chris Finch, help me help you. Because when I'm not on social much anymore because it's just not that fun. But when I do check it, like in that third quarter against OKC, everyone is just pointing at Chris Finch and saying, like the stick meme where it's like, do something.
Yeah,
do something, Chris Finch. And sometimes it is a timeout. And I echo that sentiment of the fan base. But it was 2 games ago, Ross, I think against the Spurs at home, where the Spurs were going on a little bit of a run. And Chris Finch did it. He called a timeout. I think it was in the third quarter. He drew something up, right? Like, hey, guys, come to the bench, get your personalized custom water or whatever, and let's get back out there and let's regroup. First play out of that timeout was something designed, a set play. Ant turns it over. If you're Chris Finch and you're on X, the website, you got to be like, okay, so now what? Like, what do you want me to do? I tried to call a timeout. And again, that's not giving Chris Finch a pass. I have said now multiple times, this is his, like Jaden shooting a career low from 3. I think Chris Finch is shooting a career low from coaching. I also think he thought Karl-Anthony Towns was going to be a starting power forward, right? Just like we all did.
That's entirely possible. I mean, he obviously is privy to stuff that we aren't and, obviously knew more than we did. But also, I'm assuming with 48 hours before the regular season started, he had a reasonable expectation that the roster that he saw was his roster.
And when you then listen to Ant post-game, and I have no reason to not believe this, but a lot of times Ant will go out of his way. They'll throw him a basketball question. They'll be like, hey, man, what'd you get your kid for Christmas? And be like, Finchie is coaching his ass off, trying to figure this out. And I don't think that's fake because, again, we believe Anthony Edwards just says what's on his mind, and that's why he lost a lot of money in December, because he was telling you what's on his mind. It just so happened to be criticism of the league. But for this Finch-player relationship, I don't know if in 2025 Finch needs to just be more, mean and hold these guys accountable more. I mean, I think the one tool more than a timeout, because I just kind of proved that, not every timeout works. Right, these guys got to translate it on the floor. He can't get out on the floor. Last time Chris Finch was on the floor, he blew out his knee. So it's not him. But also, too, the way that you give guys minutes. The single worst, and we left it in 2024, positive vibes only, the single worst highlight that I can remember just so happened against OKC when Julius Randle just up 7, just tried to crab dribble his way against Jalen Williams 3 different times, got the ball poked out. No one else on the team is moving. It's terrible offense. It made me, you want to talk about Chris Finch flow? It made me want to flow up watching Julius Randle try to back this guy down from the 3-point line. It led to an easy transition basket, which then kind of got OKC humming a little bit, and all of a sudden you're down 12 or 14 at the end of the quarter. So help me help you. These guys have got to help Chris Finch out a little bit. If after the game they're saying, well, we had the right plan, we just didn't execute it, well, then execute it. And if you're Chris Finch too, there are certain things, man, with rotations. When Rob Dillingham is cleared again from this injury report, which he has this weird kind of ankle thing right now, I think he's got to be in the mix, because if this does end up being a year, Ross, that it's kind of a throwaway year, the classic gap year that you took after high school, you got to know what you got. And you're starting to see it a little bit with Josh Minot, right? He's giving you a lot of good energy. He's part of that bench brigade that plays with Julius Randle that is, the bronze lineup now that has, I think, the best net rating of any 5-man pairing on the team. I kind of want to see Rob get a little bit of that too, but the players and the coaching staff need to just come together and have some more clearing of grievances, because it's not just always, hey, Finch, call a timeout, but it's also not just always on the players. Sometimes the coaching staff is putting Ant and Julius in really bad situations.
I don't want to out you and I, Kyle, for lack of prep work, but I want to call something out here. You texted me, I don't know, a couple hours ago and said, hey, let's do this. So far, as we've gone through, half of our resolutions, 3 of a total of 6, we've made natural segues for each other.
Okay.
You set up a natural segue for me just now. My resolution for the Minnesota Timberwolves, resolution number 2, the Minnesota Timberwolves at this point, they played 32 games. Some of it injury-related, as you just noted, Kyle. But Rob Dillingham has only played in 15 of those games. For Rob Dillingham's growth and the overall health of the team, considering what you gave up to move up to get him, although that pick is like a 12-year-old child at the moment, still a lot, and you don't have a ton of picks. Rob Dillingham needs to play in at least 30 games from here on out. And I'm not talking
I like that.
And I'm not talking... Yeah, and I'm not talking we're up by 18. He can play the final 65 seconds. Now, he needs meaningful time, because I hesitate to use the word throwaway. I think we talked about this in the offseason. I always thought this year, and this was assuming Cat was back, I don't want to say step back, but I kind of thought it just kind of feels like it'll be a second-round team. Who knows? Maybe they'll surprise us. Maybe they'll push to the Western Conference Finals. Who knows? Maybe they'll go to the NBA Finals. But if we're not heading in that direction, and Rob Dillingham is going to be a meaningful player for you going forward, well, then he needs meaningful minutes and meaningful time. One, to get better on his own, but also to grow with the nucleus that he's going to be playing with going forward. So I think it's imperative that if he's healthy, he can't be just riding the bench and getting the, Sagarza late game insert to just get some mop-up time. I think he has to play real meaningful minutes, and also not just for his growth. If we all still think Mike Conley's going to offer this team something down the road in the playoffs, well, then you need to keep Mike Conley as fresh as possible. And a part of doing that is Rob Dillingham playing. So honestly, Kyle, I think 30 games, if he's healthy, is probably not even enough. If he's healthy, he should be in every game at some point, playing meaningful minutes.
And not to defend Finch, because I'm 1,000% with you. I think once Rob is cleared from this nagging ankle injury, he just needs to be part of the rotation. Now, the other side of that coin, Ross, is that, okay, well, now you're talking about 10 guys again, right? Trying to get in the rotation, and that's pretty hard. However, I want to circle back to, again, like the biggest issue facing this team now is that despite not a whole new cast of characters, but Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, who play a lot of minutes for his team, you've once again found the defense. Like, this is a really good defensive team led by some really great defensive players. But the stickiness, the way, I just kind of ridiculed Julius Randle for pounding the ball into the ground. Ant does that too, right? Jaden misses shots. Like, there's a lot of just broken offensive pieces of this. But I know that when those three bench guys come in, Nikhil, Dante, and Nas, which I think they might have coined the term the other night, DNA.
Yeah, I heard that too. Yeah.
Little upset that I didn't come up with that. So whoever came up with that, shout out to Jim Pete for on the call bringing it up. But the DNA lineup of Dante, Nikhil, and Nas coming in, Rob is small, and he's 19, and he's probably going to give up some defensive stuff. So is Mike. But with Rob, there's a pace, there's an energy, there's a juice, there's a youthfulness that he brings that I think is kind of like everyone else feeds off of. And especially at home, I could spin your resolution to every home game for the rest of the season Rob Dillingham has to play. Because he kind of has that Nas following now where when he subs in, the place gets excited.
Yep.
Like, okay, let's see what this kid can do. And it sounds stupid to real hardcore basketball people, but I'm learning more and more that I'm kind of right on some of this stuff. But it's like sometimes it's not just about X's and O's and basketball stuff. It's like, hey, can we get good energy on the court? Can we get someone who's fearless? And I think Rob Dillingham is fearless. I think he is a little frustrated with his lack of role. Again, he's injured right now, which is why he's not playing. But when he's back healthy again, he needs to be thrown out there because, double-edged sword. I know Mike's not getting any younger, Rudy's not getting any younger, but at some point you have to realize, is there anything I can milk out of that anymore, or do I need to maybe cut those minutes a little bit more and just let some of the young guys see what they got? Because with Josh Minot, who plays a completely different position and is like two Rob Dillingham stacked on top of each other in a trench coat, Josh Minot now, every time he comes in, makes positive plays. And he's 21. So I think they have more of that on the bench that they need to tap into. So I'm with you. When Rob is healthy, throw him out there.
And I do know the comeback to what I just said is kind of what you finished with. Well, Josh Minot got spare playing time over a couple of years, and look at him now. Well, I would also say 2 years from now, if Rob Dillingham is only giving you what Josh Minot is giving you, then what you gave up to get him and the pick that you used, not a waste, but that's not the best ROI you could have got. And I also do understand for like Rob Dillingham and what you said, yeah, you still need to win now, but you also can't entirely disregard the future. And are you hurting the future if he doesn't get enough playing time? So that's my sole argument there. But I also know, to your point too, Kyle, yeah, we've all got on Finch for rotations and maybe not playing enough guys, but also it's not feasible to play 10 to 12 guys every night either. So I certainly understand there's only so many minutes in a basketball game. But I think when you've shown an interest and an investment in a player like Rob Dillingham, it does you a disservice for him not to get meaningful minutes and meaningful playing time.
And Timberwolves fans, historically, we were talking about this a little bit before we hit record, have always looked towards those second-round picks because, again, for most of the 36 years that this franchise has existed, they've been an extremely underperforming, underwhelming dumpster fire of an organization. And you're kind of hoping, like, we don't have a lot of assets, we don't have a lot of money, like, we don't have a lot of whatever. I hope that second-round pick sticks, right? Like, I hope Alexei Shved is, the next Manu Ginobili. The difference this time around is that this team is really good and has a lot of high-end talent. But there's also this cast of characters that are all kind of young guys like Leonard Miller, Jalen Clark, Luka Garza, obviously Josh Minot. But the difference between all those guys and Rob is that Rob, you paid a bunch of assets to get, and he was a lottery pick. All those other guys, I hope they hit. I hope Leonard Miller is the backup 5 in 25-26. But if you don't hit with them, you just use a second-round pick, and it's not the worst thing in the world. Rob Dillingham has to hit. And I think he's got the skill to do so. But that was a real investment where you said, we're running out of assets between now and 2031. Let's trade, to your point, the 12-year-old at South Middle School and go get someone who's probably that 12-year-old size but is super skilled offensively with the ball. And this team needs offense. So, Rob, rest up, heal up, do those ankle exercises. But when Rob Dillingham is ready, he needs to be thrown back out there because I think he can contribute even in 5 or 6 minute doses what Josh is doing with energy, pace, shot making, all that stuff.
So you've had Jaden McDaniels shoot better, Chris Finch help me help you. I have went with the Minnesota Timberwolves need Rob Dillingham to play more, and also the Timberwolves need to show more fight. What do you have for your third and final Minnesota Timberwolves New Year's resolution?
We've name dropped a lot of people on this pod today. That's what you and I do best. Jim Peterson, Tim Connolly, Chris Finch, Rob Dillingham, a lot of different names. I'm going to hit you with 3 more names, okay? A little bit of a random wolf of the week here.
Wow.
Are you familiar with these 3 people? Thomas Frazier, Kathleen Blatz, and Joseph Slights III.
I am not. I love Joseph Slights III. That's a great name.
Those 3 people are the 3 arbitrators currently overseeing.
Dang it. I did know that. The Kathleen name I recognize now. That's right. But now walk me through this, Kyle, though, because it's really only one arbitrator we're waiting on. I want you to finish that, but we know what side 2 of the arbitrators are going to be on.
So, quick 15-second recap. Obviously, the Minnesota Timberwolves are going through an ownership dispute between Glenn Taylor, kind of old ownership, and then new ownership, Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez and their partners. And we should hear, and Ross, I think we talked about earlier, I think you can kind of back me up on this. Based on, I'm not a reporter, but based on things that I've heard recently, this should wrap up here relatively quickly later this month. I think there's arbitrators come back sometime early January, ask some follow-up questions to each side's legal team, clarify some things, and then they will make a decision. I believe that what that decision is will be the ultimate decision. I do not believe that Adam Silver will have any issue if Mark and Alex win arbitration. I do not believe there'll be any issue getting a vote with all the other owners. I think Adam Silver is saying what happens in arbitration is how we will move forward. We want to put this to bed. I also think, and I'm super biased, but I also think that while we talk about 5-man lineups and Julius Randle's contract situation and the trade deadline and whether or not they should fire Finch, I think all of that stuff doesn't matter because this ownership thing has so many levels that I think if one side wins, there's a lot of hope. And I think if another side wins, it could deteriorate well beyond just not liking the owner. I think, Tim Connolly does have an opt-out this summer. Tim Connolly, from everything I've heard, has the best relationship with Anthony Edwards. And if Tim Connolly leaves, what's to stop Ant from leaving? And that's not fear porn or any of that stuff. I don't get paid by clicks, straight cash, salary. It's cool. I think arbitration needs to go one certain way, and then there'll be a trickle-down effect because behind the scenes, I think the parents fighting, and the parents in this case being the 2 ownership sides, I think that's starting to leak into other stuff. And I think it's making the vibes a little messier. And maybe you're like, they shouldn't do that. They're millionaires. They get paid to play basketball. I totally hear all that. I'm with you. But I think it is happening. I think the messiness of this ownership thing has now leaked into the basketball operations, and they need it resolved. I'm hopeful it'll be resolved this month. I'm hopeful that the new ownership group will eventually win out. But Thomas Frazier, Kathleen Blatz, and Joseph Slights III, you hold, in my mind, the future of the Minnesota Timberwolves in your hands.
Power. So, one rebuttal here, and maybe not rebuttal, on it affecting the play on the court and other parts of the organization. I would also 100% agree with you. How could it not? Maybe initially last year when it leaks, you block it out because on the court you're doing great. Doesn't really affect you in the short term. Over the long term, when you have to hear about it all the time, I think that can leak into other parts of the business. As far as who wins ownership, if that's what we want to call it, whoever the arbitrators decide, I'm a little bit more pragmatic. I have a group that I would like to run the team, but I don't think there's guarantees on either side that it would be successful. So as a fan, I just kind of sit back and say, okay, what will be, but I hope what it is that bees is the best situation in the long run for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And right now, Kyle, I'll be honest, I can't tell you what side that is. I have a gut feeling what side that is, but as a fan, all I can do is wait for the 3 names, the one with the really cool name, to come back and make a decision, and then we go from there.
If anyone listening to this knows Joseph Slights III, let's get him on the pod. Okay, we've gotten former basketball players from Australia on. this podcast has good pull, so let's try to get Joseph Slice III on after he makes his ruling as one of the 3 arbitrators. But no, I'm with you. And I guess to kind of dive into a little bit more, and then I'll lob it up to you for your third one, is that I don't know if the team and the organization's success turned when they drafted Anthony Edwards. Real good case to be made for that. But also, too, at that exact same time, there was new ownership. And in my mind, the best years in the history of this franchise have been when there was new ownership kind of having a say. I mean, we go back to like Tim Connolly, who his stock is down a little bit right now, but he still has brought upon the best era of Timberwolves basketball that we've seen. Well, that was a new ownership hire, right? Like some of the other stuff you're seeing in and around the franchise has been new thoughts, new mentality. So I say all of that because to point number 2 earlier with Chris Finch, this is reporting. They're not making a Chris Finch decision one way or another until this new ownership thing gets figured out. So if you're hoping that if they lose to the Celtics tonight that you're going to wake up tomorrow and Chris Finch is going to be fired, I understand the NBA, anything can happen. Mike Brown, former coach of the year, just got let go. That's not happening until this new ownership thing is settled. No one wants to make a certain move right now until they know who they report to. And once that happens, that's why I was trying to say, like, then things at least get clearer. They might not get brighter, but they at least become more clear, Ross.
Well, and that goes both ways. I think players are always going to sign contracts when they're thrown money in front of them, no matter who the general manager or the owner is. But when it comes to those business decisions or those front office decisions, I bet you Chris Finch wants to know if he's ever to sign a long-term contract or an extension. Who am I working for? I think he would like to know that as well. So it doesn't just go the route of, if we're going to can the guy who's canning the guy, it's also the guy that has to sign the dotted line. He wants to know who he's working for as well. And Kyle, you are correct. We should get answers on that here at some point in January, if not early February. It is funny, though, because when this started, it just seems like it always gets pushed back a month. Before we know it, it's going to be like July of 2027. And they'll be like, we're going to know by the state fair of 2028 who the owner of the Minnesota Timberwolves is. But no, it should come to an end here in hopefully the next 30 days or so. My final one, Kyle, I think is very simple. I think, look, we live in, I try and be positive and say it's not as divisive times as we think it is, but it's fairly divisive. I mean, fans like to fight fans of the same team. We all know that. We all see it. However, one area that all Minnesota Timberwolves fans can unite behind, Kyle, we are Detroit Pistons fans. Except for maybe a few nights from now, and there's a case to be made if you lose to the Pistons, it's not the end of the world. But we need the Detroit Pistons to make the playoffs, preferably as a top 8 team, so the Minnesota Timberwolves can get a first-round pick from the Detroit Pistons this year that is top 13 protected. Next year it is top 11 protected, top 9 in 2027, and then it just converts to a second-round pick after that. The best odds to get that first-round pick, knowing what we know, Kyle, are right now. We need the Detroit Pistons to keep winning basketball games, make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, and give the Minnesota Timberwolves an additional asset to do some more roster building or roster massaging, because you can draft a player with that pick. Maybe they come in, they play right away, they're a solid contributor, or maybe you flip that for a bench guy who's going to stand in the corner and drill threes all day long. You don't know, but you'd love to have that additional asset, and I think for the Timberwolves, it's better to have it sooner rather than later, and this is the opportunity, so say it with me, Detroit basketball. Let's go, Pistons.
We need that sounder. This is the first pod for Flagrant Howls of the 2025 year. I think we should have a recurring bit every week called the Motor City Minute, where we just do a little update on our friends down in Detroit. Currently, as we sit here on January 2nd, 15 and 18, the 9 seed in the Eastern Conference. Now, pour one out for a really young, exciting player who's having a really great year, Jaden Ivey.
Yes.
Went down with a real nasty, I think possibly broken fibula. He's probably going to be out the rest of the year. He's going to put a lot more responsibility on Cade Cunningham's shoulders. But Malik Beasley's on that team. I think he might lead the league in threes right now, or he's at least top 3. They do have a lot of young players. They're playing really well. But yeah, that is part of this whole formula, right? Is that you watch Karl-Anthony Towns play out in New York, and he's 3rd in All-Star voting right now, getting almost 10 times as many votes this year as he's ever gotten before when he was in Minnesota. Surprise, surprise. But that pick is a vital part of this trade. Dante DiVincenzo has really come around and found his groove and is, at nights, the second best player on the Timberwolves team. But with Julius Randle's contract situation and all this other stuff, that pick is a viable asset that they can trade. Like, I think they have the right to like trade the pick, even though they haven't really got it yet. But that's how the Knicks did it. So I will be watching a lot of Pistons games moving forward. And when the Pistons play the Wolves in a couple days, I'm just going to sit back. I can't drink this month, Ross. I'm doing dry January.
Good
so
for you.
I will have a nice carbonated beverage. But yeah, the Pistons are a fun little story and show that sometimes just a couple tweaks to a roster or maybe a coaching change can really turn around some of these bottom feeders. So it's been really fun to watch because that's a really good market, right? Like Detroit's got good fans, and it's been exciting to watch them, and I'll keep watching them the rest of the year.
Did you call it it's the Detroit Minute? Is that what we're going to call it?
Motor City Minute.
Motor City Minute. Okay.
Yeah.
So what does the Motor City Minute, do we get to that before or after knickknacks when we check in with the New York Knicks for a
Listen, man,
minute?
if the Wolves don't figure out the offense, we might be covering the other 29 teams come like February. So this is not on the list, but I do want to. This is Flagrant Howls, your favorite Minnesota Timberwolves lifestyle podcast.
Yes.
I see my guy Ross with a Minnesota Golden Gophers
Yeah.
hoodie on right now. So part of being a Timberwolves fan, being part of that lifestyle, is I think you're also fans of other of the local teams, maybe the Gophers, maybe the Vikings. This just hit me this week, right? We have Vikings, Lions coming up on Sunday, game 282, kind of like when the Wolves played in game 82 many years back. But you're starting to see a lot of narratives and noise out there. Lions-Vikings is going to be awesome. And the winner of that gets home field advantage in the NFC and has a real good chance to, I think, win the Super Bowl, which is crazy. But I'm starting to get like reminders or like moments of last year with the Timberwolves, right? Where they're all of a sudden you're kind of in this magical run, but you're hearing things about the second apron or ownership and all that stuff and all this chaos. And now if you're a Vikings fan, it's like, oh, J.J. McCarthy or Sam Darnold, or are they going to re-sign their safeties and all that stuff? If nothing else in this year, truly, this is serious, just embrace the moment.
Yes.
Like Sunday Night Football, Vikings, Lions, that's going to be one of the best games you've ever watched as a Vikings fan. And for me, this has been, again, I'm always prisoner of the moment, Ross. This has been the most fun I've ever had watching a Vikings team. And I am old enough to like that Brett Favre year, that run was really cool. But this will probably look different 6 months from now. And I know Purple Daily and Score North will be doing all the content and all the coverage, all that stuff. But for right now, don't worry about, Cam Bynum or who's going to be the quarterback 9 months from now at training camp. Put your purple jerseys on and just show up on Sunday Night Football, because I think this has been an awesome, awesome year, a magical run that I won't forget, kind of like I won't forget last year's Western Conference Finals run with the Timberwolves.
Yeah, there's a time and a place to do all of the talking that we do on Flagrant Howls, how we position when we talk about something, why we're talking about. Same with Purple Daily. All those Sam Darnold questions and what they're going to do in free agency, what do they do with him? Those are all fair questions. And yeah, you can talk about them, but you're really going to dive deep into those down the road. And even on Sam Darnold, I would say Sam Darnold, I said this on Purple Dailies Before I Die on Monday, a lot of the questions that people are asking and they want to worry about now, some of those questions might get answered over the next 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So enjoy the moment. And yeah, look, do I believe the Vikings are going to win the Super Bowl, Kyle? I do not. I'm not even sure they'll win on Sunday. That doesn't mean I won't enjoy it. And newsflash, that doesn't mean that they can't or won't win the Super Bowl. So enjoy it. Sit back, watch, relax. This is why we're fans, to have games like this and have moments like this. So Can I 1,000% agree with you on something? I'll just go with 100% to not be cliche. But I couldn't agree any more with you on this topic. To live in the moment, enjoy it. And I would say this. As fans, if you go back, you talk about the Timberwolves run last year, you talk about what the Vikings are doing this year, the Wild are exceeding expectations. I don't want to say things are looking up for Minnesota sports, because we all know how that goes. Oh. But it's a pretty darn good time right now. So just enjoy it and let's see where this goes.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because my wife and I did like the New Year's Eve thing where we go. It was a big year for us. Truly, like bought a house and career-wise, some good things going my way. I'm a president. But I also she was bringing up like these big things we did, like, honey, like we built a house, and I'm like, honey, the Wolves and the Lynx were like really good this year, right?
Yeah.
And the Vikings are having a magical season, and the Twins might be owned soon by real cool owners if the Ishbias can kind of close the deal. So I'm with you on that. And again, the only rebuttal, not even have a rebuttal, it's just that's a good way to maybe close this pod or just move forward, is truly just enjoy the moment. It's the start of a new year. I know people are maybe having goals to lose weight or, reach out to more people or whatever. You don't have to like New Year's. I totally get that maybe it's one of the lesser fun holidays out there, but this is a good opportunity if you're someone that needs a fresh start, fresh perspective. I always enjoy hopping on here. That's why you and I were like, should we do a pod today? I was like, yeah, let's just do 40 minutes on resolutions.
Yeah. Why not?
This has been a lot of fun, and I always, enjoy the people that support the show and support the companies that support the show. But I really do wish each person listening to this, whether we've agreed or not agreed on topics, a fresh, happy start to 2025, because if nothing else, like I said, be where your feet are, enjoy the moment. There's a lot of cool moments going on right now with Minnesota sports teams, and there's some teams that are struggling. So focus on the ones that are really good. Worry about the ones that are maybe struggling a little later down the road. But yeah, I appreciate you, Ross, and Phil, and Judd, and Dex, and it's just been a really cool ride. And I'm excited to see where this team that we cover on this show goes over these next 50 games.
Well, and regardless, Kyle, whether it's a horrible flop the final 50 games or they have a resurgence more than they've already had, there's going to be plenty to talk about with this team. So Flagrant Howls is going nowhere whether the Wolves win 50 in a row or lose 50 in a row. There's going to be plenty to talk about. There's no random Wolf of the day, Kyle, but do you want a couple random Minnesota Timberwolves trivia questions that I pulled from the interweb?
I would love that.
Okay, and I don't want to oversell these as like the world's greatest facts or the deepest trivia. These are just 5 questions I thought I feel like you're going to know these, but these were the 5 that were most likely to maybe they would trip you up a little bit, okay?
Okay, so Timberwolves trivia here to start the year.
Yep, just little Timberwolves trivia fun facts to start the year. No random Wolf because it wouldn't have been fair because I wrote the clues, so I would have known the answers. So I would have won that one, so this is fair to you. There is no multiple guess. I'm just going to kind of ask you to throw some answers out or what you think. In what year did our guy Kevin McHale become the general manager of the Minnesota Timberwolves? Any idea? Probably still to this point, the most famous general manager in Minnesota Timberwolves history. Although I suppose could be Flip as well.
Do you ever think about
Tibbs? Actually, there's a lot, if you think about it.
Yeah,
There'd be a lot of different guys.
Do you ever think about how far away 2000 was? Like, as we celebrated New Year's the other night, I had a buddy text me just like a funny meme of, remember 1999 when it was about to be 2000, like the Y2K thing?
Yes.
Like, as soon as the ball drops, like, we all might be dead. And now we have robots serving us food.
Did you see that little sticker that somebody posted from Best Buy in 1999? It was on like a refrigerator or something. It just said, remember to turn your computer off before midnight on 2000 or 1999. Pretty incredible. Yeah. You like to say how far we've come. Just think about how many general managers we've gone through. But any guess as to when Kevin McHale first took over?
McHale becomes GM of the Timberwolves. I'm going to say 2008?
1995 for the first time.
Oh, my. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
And this makes sense because he and Flip, they made the decision to get Kevin Garnett. There was a great story years ago where they sat down and they worked out Kevin Garnett, and it was basically, let's just take a look at this guy. And I was blank. Did the Wolves take him at 5?
I think they took him at 5. Yeah.
I think it was 5, and both Flip and Kevin left, and they're like, boy, we should probably take this kid. But then they both said, is he even going to be available at 5?
Yep, I'm doing some research.
Number 5.
I'm doing research on the fly. The 1995 NBA draft, which took place in Toronto, Canada, by the way. Hey. Number 1 overall pick to the Golden State Warriors was Joe Smith. Ever heard of him?
Yeah. Wink, wink, ink, ink.
And under the table, Antonio McDyess at 2, Jerry Stackhouse 3, Rasheed Wallace 4, and then, yes, Kevin Garnett, straight out of high school, 5th overall pick.
That's a pretty darn good top 5, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm
trying to think of any other names. I see at 6, Bryant Reeves, Big Country.
Damon
Stoudemire was in there. Gary Trent, ever heard of him? Theo Ratliff, a lot of good guys in that draft. But yeah, the Kevin McHale thing. So, okay, 1995, that makes sense. Also, since you said his name.
That was only a few years after retirement from playing, by the way.
Yeah, that's crazy. I will say I sent you a video because it got, now I'm thinking all over the place. Brain is heating up.
Okay.
There is an elite commercial right now going around. Go check for it. Maybe on Instagram if you just go check out Sprite's Instagram. But Anthony Edwards, who we know, Santa Claus, big partnership with Sprite. There is an insanely good commercial with Anthony Edwards and Kevin Garnett just talking hoops, gassing each other up, and it's awesome because those are the two figureheads, right, of the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Yep.
No disrespect to Karl-Anthony Towns, who had a great 9 years here, but when you think Timberwolves basketball now, you think Kevin Garnett, and then you probably think Anthony Edwards. And back to my ownership thing, they need that man, the 7-footer from high school, to be in and around this thing as an ambassador, as some sort of position. And it's only going to happen if new ownership wins this arbitration hearing, because I think Kevin Garnett could bring a lot of just juice and energy and vibes to an organization that, again, is kind of struggling. So
yeah, one way or another, he just needs to be involved in some way, shape, or form, or at least be able to have a seat somewhere in the arena and not be ostracized for it. Which Minnesota Timberwolves has his jersey retired by Miami University?
Oh, gross.
Did you almost say gross?
Well, no, just like not the Miami. I'm sure Miami University is great. Probably get a lot of applications, and people are like, "Wait, I applied to the wrong one."
Yeah. And so you caught that. I'm not talking about the University of Miami and the Canes. I'm talking about the University of Miami, which is located in Ohio.
Mark Madsen?
No, not Mark Madsen. I think he was Stanford.
Guys. Oh, okay.
Fairly well-known Minnesota Timberwolf who had a heck of a run, and I believe he won the rookie sophomore game MVP one year. May have been his sophomore year, could have been his rookie year.
Okay, I did just look this up, but Wally Szczerbiak?
It is Wally Szczerbiak.
Wow,
yep.
Okay, Miami of Ohio. Got it. Also, Ron Harper played there. That might be a name people recognize. Okay, he has his jersey retired.
He has his jersey retired. And by the way, check out Wally Szczerbiak's draft. The Wolves did quite well, but I think Sean Marion went like 6-7 picks after, who also had a great career. Wally's draft was really good. And I don't think the Wolves missed on Wally. Could they have maybe done slightly better? I guess maybe they could have, but Wally had a pretty nice career.
Yeah,
I got three
that next
more
pick
for
was
you.
Rip Hamilton, but the pick before Wally Szczerbiak was Jonathan Bender, who I don't know. Also, just it's not going to surprise many people, but I kind of have peaked as an athlete later in life because I was kind of a little fat kid in high school. So I don't have a tremendous high school basketball stats or soccer stats, although I did play varsity. It would be pretty cool, though, to have your jersey retired, whether it be at a college level or a high school level. So I don't know how much more podcasting I have to do to maybe get Red River High School to put my name up somewhere in the building or on the ground or in a urinal. But that would be my goal, just to have my name somewhere at my alma mater.
This is the first part of this podcast I've been upset with you. You took away the joke of me saying, well, Kyle, your name is probably etched somewhere in the bathrooms. But you took that one away from me.
Theige sucks.
I got
Stall
three
number
more.
2.
I got 3 more for you. Which former Minnesota Timberwolf played Stacey Patton in the 1996 basketball movie Eddie, starring your favorite Whoopi Goldberg?
Oh, man. That movie's coming back to me. I don't.
Stacey Patton don't pass the ball to nobody, if you remember that. Stacey Patton was a black hole.
I got nothing.
Stacey Patton was played by, God rest his soul, Malik Sealy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In the movie Eddie. I also learned that Joe Smith was in some basketball movie in like 2005, but I couldn't verify that. So if you want to look that up, you can.
Malik Sealy was Stacey.
He was Stacey Patton. Yeah.
Interesting. I got born in the Bronx, sadly passed away in St. Louis Park. Okay, I got to go look that up because, again, that's when you were saying jerseys hanging up in the rafters. Like, obviously, Malik Sealy is the only one that the Wolves have retired, and rightfully so. But, again, Kevin Garnett's jersey needs – how is it in the Boston Garden before it's in the Target Center? I have no idea. But I'm going to go watch that movie today, actually.
It'll happen at Target Center. I just don't know when it will be. 2 more quick ones for you. In 1989, the Minnesota Timberwolves became the blank franchise to join the NBA. What number franchise were the Minnesota Timberwolves, Kyle Theige?
28th?
23.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, but that actually makes sense, right?
Yeah, no, you're right.
Because then afterwards you have Orlando, you have Vancouver, you have Toronto, and there's other ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that 23, because what are we at now?
30.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have to go look, but I mean, still, that's also been, what other new teams? We have New Orleans.
Yeah, that's true. What I will say, once this ownership thing, not to keep hammering home, but once that's settled and the dust is settled and we know who we're spending the holidays with, whether it be mom's side or dad's side, we need to do a full deep dive, maybe hire like actual investigators on this show to just come up with how the Minneapolis Lakers, that then obviously went to Los Angeles, just got to take all that stuff. I feel like a lot of teams now, when they move cities, which is one of the saddest things that can happen because owners are just petty and want people to spend money on the stadiums when they can afford it. But how did the Timberwolves or the Minnesota basketball collection not get to keep those Lakers titles and records? I have no idea, because that's not how it happens all the time.
I think a lot of it comes down just to lawyers and negotiating when people are leaving, because the same thing happened to the Minnesota Wild. All the naming rights, all the player history, all that stuff went with the Dallas Stars. So sometimes I think it just has to deal with, if you're breaking a lease and you're leaving, just kind of what does the deal look like? People who are far smarter than I am, maybe Joseph Splites the Third or whatever his name is, he can weigh in on this one. And I want to, before I get to the last one, on that number 23, I saw that on a couple different websites. It's possible they were the 23rd named team, but by the time they actually played, they could have been the 25th or something. I don't know. I'm just trusting the interweb.
More vibes on this pod, less stats and research. So if we got that wrong, if you're actually the third team ever in the NBA, just don't get mad at us. Okay, we're working today.
Or just comment to help the algorithm. Okay, here's the final one. There were 2 finalists to be named the Minnesota Timberwolves. One of them, of course, Kyle, was the Timberwolves. Do you have any idea what the other finalist was? And fun story, they got down to the 2 finalists, and apparently the state, or the Timberwolves, sent all the names to the city councils all throughout the state of Minnesota and said, we want your cities to vote on this name, and that's how we'll figure it out. So it basically came down to the Minnesota Timberwolves basically won by a 2/3 majority, 66% to 33-ish%. Any idea what that other name was?
I am having such, not PTSD, but I cannot believe that's the final trivia question. No prep, by the way. Ross and I have not talked about this. But I randomly thought today about, asking you when I was like, what are we going to talk about? Why your parents named you Ross?
Yes.
Because I think it's a great icebreaker sometimes to, if you're just hanging out with buddies and be like, or luckily maybe with their parents or something. I'm a big parent guy. I love hanging out with my friends' parents. Being so why did you name them? Or even better, what were their other names? I think, I know my parents are actually listening to this, but I think there was a chance I was going to be a Timothy. So I could have been Timothy Theige, which actually kind of slaps.
I like that.
Tim
I do
Theige
like that.
Sounds like he is the president of an HOA for sure.
Do you want to know? Do you want to know mine really quickly? This is an honest to goodness true story.
Why you're named Ross? Yes, I do want to.
Well, why I'm named Ross is because my parents couldn't come up with a name, so they were going back and forth. And no offense to Chads, but my mother said, "Well, let's name him Chad." My dad said, "No, I don't like the name." So they're at the stage where they're going back and forth, canceling names out. So my dad goes, "I need to come up with something that I believe in, but she'll also dislike." So he came up with. And this ended up being my high school nickname because people caught wind of this, and it's totally fine. Wendell. Oh. What if I was Wendell Brendel? Wendell Brendel and Timothy Theige on Flagrant Howls. Oh, you muted. There you go. You're back. You're back.
I just completely crushed my whole system trying to laugh at that. I have a buddy listening to this who has a kid named Wendell, and Wendell's. We need more Wendells. But
we do. Wendell, it's a great name.
Wendell Brendel. That is the name you have when you work at Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. That's an Oompa Loompa's name. Wendell Brendel. Is. I will say too. Do you have a girl name? If you would have been a girl.
Oh, actually, I don't. I think they knew I was going to be a boy. I'm almost positive they knew.
Okay.
So I'll ask my dad that though the next time I talk to him.
Because I think my mom was going to call me Kylie if I was a girl. So not a lot of creativity there. Also, Kylie was something that a lot of commenters called me after I cried after that one podcast, to be honest. But I think I was going to be a Kylie. But again, Tim Theige is, no one calls me Tim. But if you see me in public and you want, I think Tim Theige kind of slaps. So, but to bring it full circle and to just close this pod down, so it was Timberwolves or
and
blank.
Something else. Yep.
Can you give me a random wolf of the week? Can you give me a clue here? Is it an animal?
I don't know. Maybe think Coca-Cola.
Were they going to be the Minnesota Polar Bears?
Polars.
Polars. That's it.
Yeah, Polars.
we're going to do some on-the-fly research quick.
I'm assuming if you're a polar, then you would probably be like a polar bear. Meanwhile, some people are thinking this podcast has went on 20 minutes, entirely too long, in which I might agree with them, but it's been great for Kyle and I to learn more about each other. Do you find it polars?
I don't know what polars are. There are some weird things popping up on my work computer right now, so might have a new resolution of finding a new job. But no, I'm glad that they went with the Timberwolves. I still struggle with Wolves, T-Wolves, or Timberwolves. I hate T-Wolves. That's just me. And a lot of like opponent broadcast teams will call them the T-Wolves. I don't think we call them the T-Blazers out in Portland, but that's another topic for another day. So I am grateful for the years that have come in my life. I'm excited about this new year, and I am excited that Flagrant Howls covers the Minnesota Timberwolves, because if it was the Minnesota Polars, Ross, I would have submitted my two weeks a long time ago.
Well, and just think about what the name of this podcast would be. I couldn't even tell you what it would be. Kyle, good work today. I think we survived without Phil. I guess the commenters on the YouTube machine will tell us if we did or if we didn't. I would say yes. What are your resolutions for the Minnesota Timberwolves? Those would be fun to read. So please put those in the comments if you have some.
What you think. And again, thanks everyone for supporting this. I hope everyone has a really good year. And we'll be back with the whole regular crew either later this week or early next week. But Wolves Celtics tonight, good litmus test to see what Ross said earlier about, what kind of jaw do you have? You drop a good one or a tough one against OKC, best team in the West. Now you're facing, no offense to Cleveland, the best team in the East when fully healthy and when fully engaged. It's a good barometer to see, like, okay, is this team figured some stuff out over this last 15 games, or do they still have a long way to go?
That, if I'm pointing the right way, that is Kyle Theige. I am Ross Brendel. We expect Phil Mackey back very soon. This is Flagrant Howls, your favorite Minnesota Timberwolves lifestyle podcast.